Good evening, everyone. I'm Pete Fosselman. I'm the Regional Services Director here in Bethesda, Chevy Chase, and I want to welcome you tonight to the FY23 Forum with our County Executive, Mark Elridge. This event is being recorded and it is televised. We have COVID safety protocol in place. We've provided masks that are up at the sign-in desk, and please don't forget to sign in if you have not. We've also provided hand sanitizer, and please abide by the rules with 6 feet physical distancing. And note the nearest exits in the room in case we do have an emergency, and please do not use the elevators if we have an emergency. I want to start by thanking our Citizens Advisory Board members, the Regional Services Center staff, especially TJ and Katina and Lynn. Lynn does our newsletter, TJ's our Urban District Manager, and Katina basically runs the building. So I want to thank them for their efforts. Also, I want to thank our Public and Information staff for tonight, the Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions staff, and last but not least, our Management and Budget staff for putting this together this evening. Also want to thank the Bethesda Urban Partnership, who keep Bethesda looking fantastic on a regular basis. And a quick note that Matt Higgins is with us tonight virtually. He's a member of Councilmember Friesen's staff. Also, our Up County Regional Services Director, Greg Wims, is here. There's Greg. There he is. Thank you, Greg. And then also our Division Chief for Volunteers, Mike Kelly from the Fire Department's here. There he is. Thank you, Mike. Quickly go over the format for this evening. We have people participating both in person and virtually. So we'll be rotating the audience's questions throughout the evening. If you have an in-person question, please raise your hand. TJ and I will be passing the mic around. And please let us keep the mic in our hand. Do not take it out of our hand to prevent germs spreading back and forth, if you could, please. If you have a virtual question, please write your question in the sideline of the Teams, and our moderators, Barry or Lorna, will help you with that. And our program is about an hour and a half tonight, so please respect that in terms of the length of their questions, because others may have questions, and please do remember there are people virtually that are going to be asking them. And lastly, just another reminder, please do sign in. It's important that we get that so we can do feedback, but more importantly, so we can do contact tracing should we have an issue with COVID. So please do sign in. And now I'd like to introduce the chair of our Citizens Advisory Board, Kristin Nelson. Thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Pete, and welcome everyone. It's great to see everyone three-dimensionally and live, and also thank you all who are watching through video. We appreciate your attendance, and thank you to the OMB staff and to Mark Elridge for joining us this evening. We appreciate it. And also a welcome to Pete. This is our first big event since Pete has joined the Regional Services Center, and we're off to a great start with Pete with the CAB, and we're looking forward to some great work this year, working especially with the other organizations in the county, and hopefully being a good advocate and a good way to spread the information that the county is offering. And tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker from the Office of Management and Budget, who will be speaking on the process and the current fiscal climate. Please welcome Rachel Silberman.
Thank you. Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Rachel Silberman. I'm an acting manager with the Office of Management and Budget. I'm very glad to be here with you all today in person and virtually. To start off, for those of you that are attending online, you can view multilingual closed captioning. It's available in 6 different languages. By following the screen there, you can see the button about where to select that. Okay. And my clicker isn't working. Okay, perfect. As far as the agenda, these are the folks that will be speaking to you today. I'm going to go over some brief points on the operating budget, and then I'll be introducing our county executive, Mr. Mark Elridge. Okay, and then briefly, I'll be discussing the purpose of these budget forums that we're holding across the county, some background about our budget process and timeline. I'll point you to some online resources in terms of where you can get additional information for those of you that are interested. And then we'll talk about the fiscal outlook in terms of the resources that we expect to be available for us as we're putting together the priorities for the next budget. Okay, so we have scheduled 5 operating budget forums across the county, and the purpose of these is to get resident feedback from you in terms of what your priorities and interests are as we're developing the next budget, and also to give you some basic background about the framework that we're operating in as we build the budget, and then of course to answer any questions that you have. We like to use these in order to encourage resident participation and engagement in our budgeting process. So again, thank you so much. The county executive and the citizens advisory boards are glad you've taken this opportunity to engage with us and share your views. Okay, in terms of basic information for understanding our budget, the county has 2 budgets. One is the operating budget that funds programs and services, so things like teachers and firefighters, childcare subsidies, trash pickup and disposal. That's all funded through the operating budget, and that's the focus of our conversation this evening. The second budget is the capital budget, and that supports facility construction, so the buildings that hold the programs that we deliver to county residents every day. And for those of you that are interested, you can find information about the fiscal 22 approved budgets on the operating and capital side at our open budget website. It's montgomerycountymd.gov/open budget. And particularly on the capital side, there are some neat mapping features that allow you to visualize how our resources are spread across the county, so you can see exactly where those facilities that are under construction are. Okay, in terms of building the operating budget each year, there are several key components to going into our framework for developing a budget process each year. The first is revenue estimates. We need to have a sense of how much, in terms of resources, we have available to fund the county executive's priorities from one year to the next. The next is enrollment forecast for Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College. Due to a state maintenance of effort requirement, we must maintain at least level funding on a per student basis from one year to the next. So as enrollment grows, we also need to accommodate additional capacity for those entities in the operating budget. We have to make sure that we're preserving capacity for our fixed costs, including employee salary and benefits, as well as benefits for our current and future retirees. And then we have to make sure that we're paying the annual debt service on the bonds that we issue in order to build the facilities that we construct through the capital budget. We need to make sure that we are taking a look at any new state or federal legislation in terms of its impact on both the revenue side, in terms of money that's coming in to support programs, and on any new mandates that might impact expenditure levels on the county side. And then, of course, the COVID-19 crisis has really impacted both of our revenues and our expenditures. There's been quite a bit of revenue volatility that you'll see reflected in some of our slides as a result of COVID-19. And then as community needs have grown, the county expenditure level has had to increase in order to address those needs and meet the demand. This is a picture of our operating budget development timeline. So it's the fall, and the fall is when the departments will begin building their budget proposals and requests. And this is also the time that we have these budget forums so that we can collect your feedback and make sure that they are incorporated to the greatest extent possible in those budget proposals for the county executive's consideration. In the winter, the county executive will be reviewing those proposals and making initial decisions in terms of his priorities and his budget allocations, and then he will transmit a recommended budget to council on March 15th. Over the spring, Council will be reviewing that budget, so they will be holding public hearings, they hold work sessions, and then they take final action on an approved budget at the end of May. So these budget forums are a wonderful opportunity to ask your questions and share your views, but there are others that we encourage you to participate in. There are county executive initiated virtual town halls. So we encourage you to participate in those. There are boards, committees, and commissions that develop recommendations and policy statements for the county executive and council's consideration. Letters and emails are a wonderful way to share your views. And there are also county council public hearings where you can participate and let folks know what your position is. And then, of course, online resources for more information. So there are 5 community advisory boards, and they are another wonderful resource in terms of engaging in the issues that affect your community. We've listed the 5 here as well as their websites, so we encourage you to take a look at those and see if there's an opportunity that you'd like to participate in to engage further through that process. In terms of our fiscal outlook for fiscal 23, Montgomery County is focused on financial sustainability. By law, we are required to pass a balanced budget each year despite revenue volatility that we've seen, particularly in the last few years. We have an aggressive reserve target policy. We are working to reach and maintain 10% of adjusted governmental revenues as part of that reserve target. We are working to manage the rate of growth and debt expenditures. We have to pay annual debt service on the bonds that we issue to build new buildings, and we want to make sure that that annual payment doesn't crowd out resources that are available to support programs and services for our residents through the operating budget. And then we also have well-managed retirement obligations. We are pre-funding pension and retiree health insurance costs. As far as the fiscal 22 approved budget goes, we had moderate growth over the prior year, only 2.3%, and a large portion of our general fund expenditures are mandatory. So I mentioned previously, due to the maintenance of effort requirement at the state level, we must maintain our per student spending. So that is an inflexible amount of money that has to go in each year. We also have the Revenue Stabilization Fund contributions and debt service payments. So together, those things constitute 65% of the fiscal 22 approved general fund revenues. Really limits what's available to fund other priorities. Some more on our projections in terms of resources. Our fiscal 21 preliminary actual tax revenues for our major our major revenue sources, such as income tax, property tax, and to a lesser extent, recreation and transfer taxes, are up above our March 2021 projection. So that's certainly a good sign, although it is preliminary pending finance department's closing of the books at the end of the year. And this is really attributable to the infusion of federal funds that we've received since fiscal 20, and without that, we would have been in a much less rosy situation. We have continued uncertainty around bus fares, licensing, and permitting as a result of the future of the COVID pandemic impacts. And on the plus side, we did just a few days ago learn that the state of Maryland is ending fiscal 21 with a significant fund balance of $2.5 billion. So that certainly is a good indication in terms of the direction that we may be looking at. And again, the county August income tax distribution was also above our revised estimates. There are a few pieces of information that are important to really better understanding what the resources will be for fiscal 2023 that are still outstanding. So those are October property tax distributions as well as our November income tax distributions. So once we have those, we'll have a much better sense of how much is available to support priorities moving into fiscal 23. Some other fiscal indicators that we look at, home sales are up substantially this year over the last year, up 32%. We have kind of a mixed bag in terms of the county's unemployment rate. It went up significantly as a result of COVID, up to 8.6%. It has come down some to 5.7% in July of this year, but it still has not returned to its pre-pandemic level. And we have really benefited the county from federal-related unemployment and business assistance programs, which have really mitigated the impact that unemployment might have otherwise had on our budget and available resources. So these are a few pictures to illustrate some of the numbers in the budget. This is a picture of our fiscal 22 fixed commitments as a percentage of the general fund revenues. And basically, this is to show how much of our budget is spoken for before we start even addressing the other priorities we may have. So here you can see more than 50% of our budget in terms of general fund revenue are committed to Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College maintenance of efforts. Another nearly 12% is committed to debt service payments, and then 7% is required to support our pension obligations, our contribution to the reserve fund, and our health insurance contributions for retirees. So after all of that is taken into account, we've only got 28.5% left of our general fund revenues to support other county priorities. Okay, this is a picture of where most of our money comes from. So the light blue line shows the largest revenue source for the county, which is property tax revenues. That's a little over 30%, and income tax is a little under 30%. The third largest category in the orange is intergovernmental funding. So these are resources we receive from the state and federal government. And then we have other miscellaneous revenues such as fees for service, and fines and things like that. Okay, and this is my last slide. This shows you where our money goes. So the county's operating budget in fiscal 22 was nearly $6 billion. You see in the light blue that almost half of that went to support Montgomery County Public Schools. The next three largest categories are health and human services, debt service, and public safety. So after those four categories are accounted for, you've really only got 35% of the remaining budget to address all of the other things that county government seeks to do for its residents. So with that, I'd like to introduce our county executive, Mr. Mark Elridge, to discuss his operating budget priorities.
Take that off for the moment because it's a little bit easier to understand me without that on. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about our major policy goals, which we occasionally refer to as the 5 E's. The priorities that we're working on are, first of all, educational opportunities for all. Education's always been a primary focus in Montgomery County, one of the things that we have built a strong reputation on, and that remains one of the most important things that we're doing. Second one is equity and advancing social justice. This county has been deeply involved in equity work. We are working with our first equity officer, and now programs are going through an analysis to make sure that everybody in the county is getting access to funding, that it's not concentrated in particular geographic areas or in certain groups of people, so that there's a more equitable spread of what we do, as well as programs that we can develop that help make sure that everybody in the county has an opportunity to truly benefit from living in Montgomery County. Along the same lines and related to all that is economic development across the county. Continuing to try to provide growth opportunities, and one of my major focuses has been on trying to drive a higher level of job creation in Montgomery County than we've had over the last 10 years. If you read enough of the news out there, we've been relatively flat in terms of job creation, and we've been trying to find ways to stimulate the economy and provide more opportunities for businesses to come to Montgomery County, for businesses to grow and develop in Montgomery County, and to increase higher wage employment beyond just minimum wage jobs. We are committed to environmental sustainability and fighting climate change. We see this every day. You know, we have flooding now that we never had before. Neighborhoods that were never underwater are underwater now. That's a scary thought because one of the most expensive things we will have to undertake at some point is reconstruction of our stormwater system. A lot of it was built in the 50s and the early 60s and the 70s. It no longer can handle the water that's coming off of the floods or the rainstorms that we have. And I think you all know we've had one tragic flooding incident with an apartment where someone actually died. So there are lots of ways we have to fight climate change, and we're committed to doing that. And we have to become efficient and effective in delivery of our public services. And that's something that, you know, I've wanted to do when I first came in here, because I felt that if we're going to use the public money, the public should be reasonably assured that we're spending the money well and we're targeting on things that are priorities. And so we continue to work at that. Our initiatives, some of the things that were most important to me, one is expanding early care and education. If any of you listened to me on the campaign trail, I would tell people I wasn't promising very much because I knew that the county was in very difficult financial straits. And when I came in, 2 days after I came in, I was invited to a meeting where I was told, and I forget whether the number was 40 million or 60 million, but basically the budget the county was operating in 2018, 2019, was short that much money. And we were going to have to make cuts in the middle of the year to bring that in line. And it's being short had implications for the budget we were trying to put together for the next year. And if that wasn't bad enough, about 3 weeks before we submitted our budget, the state said our revenue estimates are wrong, and the county had to write down another large sum of money. So all told, we were reducing our budget by about $90 million in the very beginning. That was my introduction to things in the county. And so I knew this was going to come because I could see what was happening with the budget in the county, and I knew what our limitations were. And so I told people, I'm not going to promise you very much. I'm going to focus on environmental things, and I'm going to focus on early childhood, because if we're going to close the gap and if we're going to level the field in Montgomery County, we need to provide quality early childhood education opportunities for the children in this county to make sure when they start school, they start on a level playing field. So we've been increasing that funding over the first 2 years, in 3 years of our budget, actually. Every year, despite everything else that was going on, we prioritized increasing that. We're working at preserving and increasing affordable housing. This has been a priority for us. We were able to negotiate a better deal on something that was in the master plan, where we actually got tenants the right to return to their apartments after the project was redeveloped, not just the right to apply, but the right to actually return. We're building a project on Veers Mill Road that is all affordable, below 75% of area median income, going down as low as 30% of area median income. And we're looking for other opportunities to encourage tenant ownership and to encourage more affordability in our housing. We have to build a bus rapid transit network. When you ask the business community what the biggest drawbacks to economic development, not only in Montgomery County, but in the region are, they will cite the bus networks in this region. As great as Metro is, it does not serve most of Montgomery County. If you think about it, there's no cross connectivity in a metro system. There's no east-west movement in a metro system. And it basically goes down Georgia Avenue and Wisconsin Avenue. If you're not there, then you don't have a ride. And so we need to provide a more robust system. We need to let, when we're trying to convince development to come to the county, that we're going to be able to put the transportation in place like Virginia can do. And I will say I've spent a lot of time looking at what Virginia does that's enabled them to move ahead of us. And you'll be hearing more from us on this, but it is important to do things differently. And it's important here to provide transit in the county. We are working at fighting climate change. This is an absolute priority for us. So we've done a lot of, I think, exciting things. If you follow the news, we broke ground on the first microgrid in Montgomery County. It's going to be in Brookville. It's going to provide solar electricity to 70 electric buses, which we'll be bringing into the fleet. We're also going to be bringing hydrogen buses into the fleet so we can handle long haul. We're converting the county vehicles to electric vehicles. This will be done over a period of years, but we're going to set an example because we can't ask residents to do things that we're not able or willing to do ourselves. So we're finding ways to do that. And the county council just approved the International Green Building Code, which we submitted pretty much unchanged from the original code. And we've sent forward to the council building energy performance standards for buildings that already exist in order to bring them up to higher levels of efficiency. Because when you're in a largely built environment, what gets built for the next 140,000 people is dwarfed by what is on the ground today. And if we don't address what's on the ground today, you will not reach the climate goals that we have, and we will be like everybody else, not getting to where we need to go. So this is critically important to us. We're looking at improving economic and community development opportunities in the county. So again, looking what other people have done, we lost Amazon. But on the other hand, what occurred is that, I looked at where it was planned to go, which is White Flint, and realized the largest underdeveloped properties sitting on top of a red line in Montgomery County, sandwiched next to NIH, with life sciences to the north and south of it, and the opportunity to turn that into a development center to help build the life sciences industry, which is Montgomery County's great strength. And yet we underplay that. People don't know about us to some extent. People in the industry will say, if you say you're in Montgomery County, Maryland, even though we're probably the fourth largest cluster, people are like, where's that? And so we need to solve the where's that problem, and we need to make the kind of investments that are going to draw more folks from the life sciences industries into Montgomery County. And given our work on vaccines in Montgomery County and our work in general on treatments and everything, we stand to be a major beneficiary of this initiative. And I'm hoping we're working with MATA. Our goal is to create a joint development agreement where we will solicit a master developer to focus the development of White Flint around life sciences. And we believe, because we're already seeing movement in this, that properties around the metro property will also pivot toward life sciences in terms of what they're attracting in the business world. And we think this is a great opportunity for Montgomery County. The last time we made a purposeful decision on development was really when we created the life sciences centers up by Shady Grove. It's been a long time, and it's time for us to do something. We are not going to change our job growth trajectory unless we consciously try to develop parts of the economy that we're strong in. And so we are committed to doing that. And transportation is a part of that equation. Dealing with equity issues is another part of that effort. You have to raise the ability of the workforce to take the jobs in a modern economy. You read stories all the time about 130,000 jobs in DC area going vacant, not because we don't have the people, but because the folks who are here don't have the skills to take those jobs. We need to make sure that as we educate our children, that they're prepared to take the jobs that are out there, because these are good jobs, and we can do better, and we're going to do better. We are working at reimagining public safety, another high priority issue for us. And Montgomery County does not have a bad police department, but there are a lot of things about what goes on in policing that are really rooted in how people get trained. I mean, I've got to say that, when you look at some of the incidents that have happened, and I've watched far too much footage of some of the things that have happened in the county, you realize that it is not the problem of a bunch of rogue officers going out and doing bad stuff. It's actually people doing what they were trained to do. And in my mind, it emphasizes the importance on how you train people, how you tell them to carry out their job. Because if you're trained to do something that at the end of the day puts you at risk, you're likely to make a bad decision. And when I looked at some of the things that happened, I felt like, watching all this video, that if something had happened in the beginning, if something different had happened, a couple of minutes later, maybe we don't wind up with the endings that we have. So we're looking at how we do that. We're going to put an end to pretextual stops in Montgomery County, used for all the wrong reasons. And we think, and we know that we can change this. So we've hired a consulting group. We had a very large public group that contributed to the discussion about public safety. We're going to be bringing forward changes to the police department in terms of how they carry out their operations, And I think we're going to be able to bring this county along to a more modern police department that reflects our values. I understand, I've talked to officers who, 1 year are rewarded for things they were doing, and the next year they're chastised because those things are no longer acceptable. They shouldn't have ever been acceptable. But the problem we have to deal with is what used to be passable is no longer passable. Enough people have woken up to what is happening that it's not going to be accepted anymore. And we all need to figure our way forward so that we can get out of this mess and we can still have the public safety that we want. But all residents need to feel equally and fairly treated. Those two things should not be incompatible. We should be able to achieve that. And along similar lines, we're advancing goals of racial equity and social justice. It's absolutely critical that we do this work. So I talked a little bit about the child care part. I talked a little about affordable housing. We're looking at things like no net loss of affordable housing. Park Planning has a projection out there that says we're going to lose between 8,000 and 11,000 affordable housing units over the next decade. I have 20,000 households at 30% of area median income. That's about $30,000. They live here today. They're spending 50 to 60% of their income or more to live in Montgomery County. And there's another large group between 30 and 50%. And the fact is, if our primary housing program is moderately priced dwelling units, we like to brag about it. It doesn't serve people in either of these two income brackets. So we also have projections that 40,000 households are going to come here. If you look at the numbers behind the projections, something on the order of 2/3 to 3/4 are MPDU priced housing needs or lower. 3/4, 1/4 would be around market rate housing. 3/4. Our policies right now generate between 12.5% and 15% moderately priced dwelling units out of a development. So you do the math yourself. You don't get to the need in Montgomery County unless we figure out a different way to do our housing, and I'm absolutely committed to doing that. Other things that we're doing on the COVID response and recovery, we have, it's been a hell of a 19 months. I think it's the 13th of this month will be the 19th month. And when this started, none of us knew what exactly to do. Do you mask or don't you mask? Is it spread by breathing? Is it spread by droplets landing on the doorknob you're going to touch? Is it going to go away in the summer, as a certain ex-president once said, because it's going to get warm? That didn't happen. I remember sitting around, and we were talking in May about, are we going to open for the 4th of July? That didn't happen. And so we've watched this roller coaster of bringing the virus levels down and then getting spikes in cases and getting another downward turn and then another spike in cases. We're now going through yet another spike in cases where it's beginning to go down. So that's what we were confronted with in the beginning. And so we've had to do a lot of things. So far, for rental assistance and homelessness prevention, we've put out $44 million to date. Small businesses have received over $25 million in direct assistance from the county. Economic and tourism revitalization has received $25 million. We've expanded the Working Families Income Supplement Program, adding another $25 million to our expenditures to help working families manage here. And we're the only county in the United States that did that. We put out $25 million in food and 20 million meals served. 20 million meals between us and the school system and our nonprofit partners. 20 million in meals and, did I say 25? And $25 million in actual food security money. So we've done a lot of work there. We've put $15 million into child care assistance to make sure the child care providers were able to stay open through this. We put out $11 million in emergency assistance for families. This is beyond the rental assistance. We've given direct aid to hospitals of $10 million. In the beginning, when I realized we were not going to have enough personal protective equipment and we were not buying on a long-term scale, I had our departments load up on protective equipment because I didn't know if we were looking at one virus wave, two virus waves, and I was not going to go out to the market like we had to the first time and try to find things that we did not have. And at some point, we were actually able to supply hospitals and businesses with personal protective equipment because we were able to get it and they didn't have it. We sold to jurisdictions outside Montgomery County, not for a profit, but because we had it, we were able to make sure other people who needed it could get it. We targeted health programs at the underserved and the hardest hit communities. That was $24.4 million. And we created a mobile health clinic to address health disparities, and that was $900,000. We stood up these hubs around the county, and most county services had always flowed through HHS. And when we realized we weren't reaching deep enough into the community, we made a decision to pivot toward partnering with community groups and getting hubs standing up in the community that actually had better contacts and better ability to contact and work with people who just didn't respond to the government. You know, if you're a Central American refugee and you're the government and you say, I'm here to help you, that's not necessarily what people's experience is with government. And so we've had to overcome that. In the African American community, we've done an enormous amount of work trying to help people understand that for whatever your misgivings about medicine in America and how it's treated the African American community, this virus is real and the vaccine was real and would make a difference. And we've worked hard on that. So when we were in the early stages of vaccination, the Hispanic community was vaccinated 18% less than the white community. The African American community was about the same. The Asian community was more vaccinated than the white community. Today, the Asian community is still the highest vaccinated group. Hispanics are the next highest vaccinated group. White folks are third, but the Black community is almost now on parity with the white community. So we have done enormous work to close the gap. And what we take away from this is that going forward, we need to keep this hub model in place because it gets us better communications in the community. And we need to think really, really hard about healthcare. I know the hospitals, came to realize when they saw all the COVID patients with pre-existing conditions that we have large portions of the population which are not well cared for and don't have access to healthcare. And we've got to make sure that we have a more equitable spread of healthcare. It's not just a Montgomery County problem. This is a national problem. But we are doing what we can to deal with that. This is shows our COVID vaccinations. The box on the left is the 83% of the entire population is vaccinated with one dose, and 75% of the entire population is vaccinated with 2 doses. Remember, if you're under 12, you're not getting vaccinated at all, and that's part of the entire population. But if you look at county residents who are eligible, if you're a senior, we're virtually 100% with 1 dose and 96% with 2 doses. If you're 12 years and up, we're about 98% with 1 dose and 89% with 2 doses. And if you're 12 to 17, the range is there because the certainty or the reliability of the numbers is a little uncertain, but still pretty high numbers for that age group. So we've been able to vaccinate people at a level that nobody else has. We are the most vaccinated jurisdiction, over 300,000. Our case rate compared to the state has been about half. And there are jurisdictions in the state that a couple of days ago were running 5 to 6 times as many cases per 100,000 as we are. We have the lowest positivity rate. Us and Howard County bounce back and forth. Howard County does not have 1.1 million people in it or anywhere close to that. So we've been able to get people vaccinated. And I always make a point of thanking the residents of Montgomery County because the advice we gave isn't really dramatically different than the advice that lots of people have given throughout the country. The difference is people here listened. People paid attention. I give a lot of credit to my health officer, Dr. Gales, who served us, I think, remarkably well through the pandemic, but the ability to give clear, consistent messages to our residents about what we needed to do in order to stay safe, I think paid off. And the fact that the residents in this county took this seriously is a real tribute to the residents who live here. When you look at the senior number, you realize that regardless of race, religion, any factor, political party, you got vaccinated. There's nowhere in that number is there a reservoir of people who have said, I'm not doing it. And in general, our numbers look like it's working across the population pretty broadly. So we're going to keep working at it. Our intention is to drive this as low as we can possibly drive it. We know that when waves come, if you start from the lower point you start from and the higher your vaccination presence in the community, the wave can't climb as high. And so what we've been able to do is been able to knock those waves down. Every jurisdiction gets them, but we've been able to manage this better than most people have. And again, thanks to all of you. This gives you an idea of, vaccinations. These are the left chart shows our weekly totals. Our vaccination rates have dropped somewhat. This is testing, sorry. Our testing has dropped somewhat, but then it's gone back up. We need people to keep getting tested. Even if you're vaccinated, if you're in a public-facing job, or if you've been out with lots of people, or I'd say even if you go to indoor restaurants sometimes, getting yourself checked is not a bad thing. And if you certainly think you have symptoms, you ought to be doing that right away. You can see who does testing in the county, and the green is the public county site. We've been the largest testers. I think somebody told me there's only a couple of, the University of Maryland system or some other big groups have been tested more than Montgomery County's public health is in the entire state. And this, we took this on. We were able to get, both testing and vaccines in the county, and we made a determination that we were going to play a central role in this. And I think, I'd give a lot of credit to the folks in our health department for being able to do this. And I thank them, and I largely get comments from people about the orderly processes that exist when you go out to get tested or you go out to get vaccinated. So again, this is what we've been able to do. And next. So this is kind of a summary of where we sit. We're number one in 12 plus, fully vaccinated among all counties with more than 300,000 residents. That's the totals on percentages as of 9/27. So they're all higher than this now. We're sitting here a week later. And so the numbers are larger than this. And there's just an enormous amount of testing that we've managed to do in this county. Just from March 8th to September 20th, another 335,000 tests. So we are determined that we are going to drive this thing as far into the ground as we possibly can. And hopefully treatments will emerge more so than they have, and vaccines will be modified to deal with, we know, changes that variants will bring. But I believe, from what I've seen in the scientific community here, that people are on top of this now. We lost track at the very beginning of the virus. Certain things happened in the preceding years that impeded where this country should have been. But we're in a place now that we can, I believe, handle this, and we can continue to respond to it, and that's what we're going to do. The federal response has been pretty amazing, particularly, since January. We've got $388 million in direct aid to the county, $424 million to MCPS, $75 million for Montgomery College, $70 million for transit services. Absolutely critical to us to keep the buses running when our ridership drops so severely. $75 million in rental assistance and eviction prevention, and $5.5 billion for the state government. That's a lot of assistance that's come into Montgomery County and the state of Maryland, and I think it's really made a difference in what we're able to do in Montgomery County. And I just, want to thank our, federal leadership for stepping up and making sure that not just Montgomery County, all the counties in this country would have been in the same mess. And the good thing about the financial report that you heard earlier is recovery in revenues is going to give us an ability to sustain going forward without reliance on the federal funding. We would have had a very difficult time this year making the budget work had we not had the federal funds. The recovery in our economy and the recovery in our taxes is putting us in a much better position because there's not going to be this money flowing in next year. We're going to be more dependent on our own resources. And next. So we're looking at the budget through multiple lenses. The first thing I'll tell you is when I came in, these hearings used to be done in January and later. and the departments are already developing budgets, we decided we would actually get public input on what you wanted to see in a budget before we developed the budget. Thought that might be helpful. And so we've been doing this for the last few years. We look at things through a racial equity lens, and we're expanding the use of that tool. Look at where investments are made in the county, including capital investments. Do the parks go everywhere? Do rec centers get fixed everywhere? Are needs in one part of the county addressed and in other parts of the county not addressed? And so we'll be looking at that. We're looking at work through the climate change lens. This county has an extraordinarily ambitious plan of 80% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2027 and get to zero by 2035. When the council passed this, and I was on the council when we did this, we did not know how we would get there. We really didn't. That's why there was no climate plan passed when we did it. It was we set goals. The reason we set goals this ambitious, because if I had set a different goal, if I had tried to meet a lower standard and we had met it, we would have what? Applauded ourselves and said, you met this, even though it's not enough to deal with climate change. So with goals like these, we are never able to say our job is done. There's no way we say, yeah, we got it. We took care of it. We have to work at this every day. If you go online and look at our climate plan, it outlines things we need to do. Some things depend on money we haven't identified yet. Some things we've actually started doing that weren't in the climate plan, because just in the last 2 years, there have been changes in technology and changes in the way we can finance things that opened up possibilities that weren't there before. And I want to assure everybody who thinks this isn't fast enough that this is a living document. We did not set this in stone and say what we wrote last year is exactly what the plan is going to be. Every year it'll get reviewed. Every year as more resources become available, as technologies change, we will look to update it and take advantage of everything we can do to accelerate the schedule and make sure we achieve our goals. So don't despair if you don't see everything you want in there today. It will get there, and we're determined to make sure this budget lives and this process lives the entire time that we're building this out. We are reviewing ideas from our employees. To me, this has been really important. We have people who work here every day, and traditional way the government works is there's the management over here, the employers over there, and we don't take advantage of the brain power that we have in our own county. And I experienced this when I was a council member from people who would always tell me about ways you could do things better. And it's not just employees grousing. It's people who look at their jobs and want to do a better job, people who understand that we could take advantage of opportunities and do a better job of taking those opportunities. So I've made it a priority to keep working with our workforce and engage them in the process of not only budgeting, but in looking at the operations of our departments, so that we have a level of confidence that if people have ideas, we're actually listening to them and seeing if we can make them work. So we've tried to change the culture, which is not always an easy thing to do. And we're listening to ideas from the community. The whole hub thing and our commitment to that came out of community people who said, we can get deeper than you can. Give us a chance to help you. We listened. We didn't say this is the way Montgomery County does things. We said, yeah, we know we're not doing what we need to do. And we pivoted. And we'll continue to pivot. We take community input and we'll build our budgets on that and make sure that people feel they've had a meaningful role in the processes that we have. On climate change momentum, we're working at environmental sustainability. The microgrid initiative I mentioned, that's no small thing because we're going to replicate that. The electric ride-on buses and the others that are coming by 25 will begin the major transformation of our fleet. And our goal is to be all electric by 2035. And if I can accelerate it faster than that, I will. So with that, I think I'm through the deck. Is that true? Okay, so I'll stop there and thank you all for listening, and happy to take questions from people.
Oh, sorry. Finally.
Thank you very much for. And I'm here.
Essentially a public-private venture that we think will advance the goals of the White Flint area, the North Bethesda area. And so as you're putting together the FY23 budget, I think, you know, what we're looking for is support initially for some supplemental funding to get this stood up, and then building it out over only a couple of years. We don't envision this being in perpetuity to get this organization moving forward. And what I think is unique about it is that we've got interested parties, particularly the property owners, that are willing to pony up, to put their fair share into this. I think there's probably others out there to make this work. And again, you said, well, where's that place? Memo and so forth. So we'd like to work with you on that as you build your 23 budget.
I really appreciate that. You are looking at that. Similar need to make some community investments to help encourage things to happen there, but I'm optimistic. I mean, if you know me, my reputation was I was the anti-developer guy. Like, I understand fully that I can't move forward if we cannot build the economy here. You can't do social programs without money. You know, there's no hire and there's no investment in more education without money. So we've got to find the balance of making sure we grow the economy so that we can also serve our people better and build a stronger county for everybody who's here. So I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nancy Wilkinson, and I'm a part of the Montgomery County Climate Action Plan Coalition. And my interest is, first of all, we're delighted to finally have the climate plan that was produced in June of this year. But what are your actual specific climate action budget items, plans for fiscal year 2023?
For 2023, you know, this year we created, finally, which I told people I would do when we were ready, we've created a climate position in the government. Now that we've got a plan, I felt this was the time to bring that person on staff, and so we've brought that person on staff. We started doing the grid work already. We've made the commitments to buying electric buses already. We're working with Ford on developing police cars that will be electric police cars to replace our current police cars. The council just passed the Green Building Code, which will have, implications going forward. And if they pass the BEPS plan, then the strategy that deals with 50% of the, emissions in this county will begin to be set in place. The challenge is going to be finding money to fund it. We're obviously looking, frankly, to the Biden administration, which has real strong commitment to environmental goals to help us do this. Montgomery County can't do this by itself. This is a national crisis, and we would like more support. But we're continuing to do that. We will look at what other opportunities we have in this budget, but that's why we're going out and doing these forums now to see what people's priorities are. But it's a priority for me. Having a plan makes the work a whole lot easier because at least we know where we've got to go. And I do think there's some low-hanging fruit. We've got a proposal on the street now that potentially looks at our entire waste disposal. I wanted to get rid of the incinerator. I was blocked from getting rid of the incinerator because the former county executive signed an extension right before he left. which meant I could not kill it when I wanted to kill it. So now I've got to deal with it for a few more years. But in the meantime, we're looking at, we've actually asked for proposals for everything from how would you redo part of our waste stream to how would you deal with our entire waste stream. We're putting a pilot in place for food composting, not just commercial, which is already piloted. We're doing a pilot now for residential food composting. That's an enormous change, because if I get that food out of the waste stream and I don't burn it and I don't, waste it, so that just emits methane and goes up into the atmosphere, whatever, that's a big victory for us. And it takes something out of the waste stream that I no longer can burn, which to me would be another way of helping shut down the incinerator. So we're working on everything we can do. I'm ultimately limited by the dollars I have. And I think if you saw the budget, when you look at out of the $6 billion, what the county actually has fungible, it's somewhere around $900 million. And people don't realize, all the time people say, why can't you do this with your $6 billion budget? It's like, well, when I pay for the schools and the college and debt service and retirement and everything else, what's left over is really, really small. It's not what I would like to see, but we're going to prioritize as much as we can within that to make sure we achieve those goals. And like I said, we will try to lead by example, so that if we do things and we can show people it works, hopefully other people take this up.
And some additional funds be included in the budget for stormwater management improvements in older neighborhoods. That comes from somebody who's at home anonymous.
That could have come from any number of people in Montgomery County. So that's part of what we're looking at. We put a hydrologist, I think it's a hydrologist in our budget, to begin the analysis of this. We're going to be asking, the federal government, we, had an offer of FEMA assistance. We would like to see if FEMA would help us in the assessment of all the different flood risks in the county. The county's got a list of, I think it was 500. That apartment that flooded was actually in the middle of that list. So it gives you an idea of the magnitude of what we have to do in the county. But we recognize we need to do this work. And so that kind of work's going to start getting built in the budget. Again, I'm hoping that the federal government and somebody else, the state, is willing to help on this, because any one of these things could be your entire capital budget, and it wouldn't even get the job done. And so we need assistance, but we're going to do our part to make sure we start addressing this.
All right, we'll take another question from our virtual participants. Will there be some additional funds for Vision Zero, including sidewalk installation? There is a much needed sidewalk on East-West Highway from Beach up towards Connecticut.
Trying to picture that. But I mean, I think the answer is yes. I mean, we are looking to advance the Vision Zero effort. It is always challenging, but we want to do more in terms of sidewalks. I want to do them in ways that I don't wind up bulldozing all the trees in the neighborhood, which has been an issue in some communities. But we think we can, do more of this work. I'm a big fan of, for example, those either plastic or metal posts, depending on the jurisdiction, that you see in the road that square off the corners, so that cars can't just swing around the corner, but they actually have to make a proper right turn and reduce their speed enough so they can make that right angle turn. Things like that, which aren't high cost, but are actually high value because they make the walking environment safer for people. So we will continue to expand our investment in Vision Zero.
That's right. I know you can't fund everything, but I'm wondering about the office that has to write the regulations for things like BEPS and CCE and IGCC, will we at least be able to get a start on having the regulations in place for when we can do the work?
Absolutely. I mean, the nice thing about the building code becomes a regulation in and of itself. And so when you adopt the building code, that's what you have to build to. So for the IGCC stuff, it's pretty straightforward. For BEPS, it's like people are going to have to do reports and analysis of their building's energy consumption and then pick from a menu of things because every building's different. Some buildings you might be able to address by solar energy production. Some buildings you might wind up making a bigger investment in changing windows and insulating the walls. It's less prescriptive than the IGCC is because when I'm starting with a brand new tableau and I'm building a building from the start, it's much easier to build the stuff into it. But we will write regulations and developers or property owners will have options about what they can do to get there. We're not going to prescribe the fine detail of everything. It's going to be, this is the goal. You can help us figure out how you're going to get there.
Hey, Mark, over here. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Actually, my first participation in budget forum was right after you were elected. And at that conversation, I met with other people who voiced similar concerns about the flooding and climate change. So I appreciate the fact that you convened the work groups and have developed the climate action plan. So that's great. The question I have is, and we know this is a long-term effort to change how we live, both to reduce greenhouse gases and to adapt and, do all the things that are needed to be done equitably. So have you thought about perhaps putting in place like a 5-year strategic budget? So even though budgets are done annually, but to be able to build in some, pathway to these long-term changes that are needed.
So within our existing revenues, that's really hard to be sure what a 5-year path would look like. And I'll give you an example. If you look at our capital budget when we bring it out, you'll see that the council just passed guidelines that lowers our capital spending by another $10 million every year. And we have a hard time meeting the school requirements today. There's going to be state money available, for example, for more school construction. I have to provide a match. I don't even have a match for that in this budget. And that's a challenge with adding anything else that's going to be capital intensive, is what do I take out of the budget absent a major infusion of money? And I know I've heard, I know some people are saying, well, we'll just take money out of the energy tax because, it sounds like that was meant, to curb energy use and it should be go to the environment. And you can say that in its true statement, but that money actually, and that tax was put in place in order to fund the general fund back when the recession hit and the economy collapsed. The energy tax became one of the things the county could do because it had limits on what it could do with income taxes and property taxes. And so that plugged a hole. It's still plugging a hole in the budget. So I could take money from there and dedicate it to climate, but then I'd have to find the money from source as of yet undetermined to fill that hole back up. So that's why we're looking at this on a year-by-year basis. We've got a path, and we'll develop, like with the buses, how fast can we flip them? When we get to the cars, how fast can we cycle the cars from gas to electric? But it's hard to put a cast in stone 5-year capital plan out there because I can't honestly tell people what the capital reserves beyond what I need to deal with the budget are that I'm going to have available. And I hate being in that position. If this is not something I like to say, but I think, people have to have at least a realistic assessment of where the budget is and what we're able to do. If there was a groundswell in this community to increase taxes on a couple of things to provide the money to reinvest, if people said, we'll give you money, but only for example, climate. We don't want you to take the money in the general fund and use it for just anything. If there were targeted expenditures that had broad support in the community, I'd be the first one to support revenue enhancements to make that possible. It's partly why we're looking at other ways. Again, I said, well, you'll hear more about this later. Other ways of funding our infrastructure, more like what Virginia does, because if we could move to that model, it would actually free up some of the resources we're spending today. But that's going to require, council acceptance of a different model of how we tax development. And it would actually be less expensive in some ways for developers than what they are paying, but would actually result in more money for the county, which sounds at odds with each other, but actually over 20 or 30 years, it lets us fund things with bonds that right now we're funding out of current revenues. It would free up, give us a little bit more latitude than we have right now. I could do what I did at all the press conferences. They would constantly ask me when you're going to do something. I said, we'll do it when the time's right to do it. And that's what we'll do. We'll do it when the time's right to do it. I think our goal was 10 days in a row out of the substantial range. We're not there yet. If we get to that and our cases are truly going down, then we can do this. But you can't do this on a one-day glimpse. And I've had single days where our numbers fell below 100. And then 2 days later, they're looking at 151. And so we have to have a consistent level of reduction in cases to do that. But we will get there. I'm confident if any place can get there, we'll be the place that can do it. And I feel, I've been out, I see people out on the street. We're able to come together like this. We don't worry about this being a super spreader event because virtually everybody's vaccinated. So we're in a better place, and I do think we're going to stay in that place. We will get there. I don't view masks as a grand imposition. Do I like wearing a mask all the time? Probably not. But do I care? Not at all. And it's a minor thing in the scheme of things, and it's what kept us safe. So as long as we need it, we'll do it.
Okay, we'll take another question here from the virtual participants. With the new change in school resource officers and an uptick of student fighting, can recreation do more to support students, especially in challenged schools?
So we're working with the school system, and one of the things that they've done is actually come up with a comprehensive plan on staffing the schools with additional supports for students. And I was really happy to see this. It's more than I imagined they would do. They were able to start this with the federal funding, gives them the cushion to do it. I told them that we'd be able to absorb it in the county budget. Probably take us a couple of years to absorb it, but it will not be a major headache for us, and they've got the funds to keep funding it. I'm not sure it's the recreation programs as much as the social and emotional supports that kids need. Recreation programs, frankly, in some degrees could be risky for people at this point. But getting the counselors into school, getting school psychologists into school, being able to support the students' needs is probably it's certainly the greatest need that people have identified so far. But we're aware of the problem and we're working on it. Anybody else here?
More questions here from the virtual folks at home. It is always assumed that economic growth is good, even as it causes more land clearing for roads and buildings. What's wrong with having a steady state economy, which is like the Delta body, where no further growth is needed, yet there is plenty of productivity?
So we don't control the structure of the Montgomery County economy. And the fact is we have, more lower paid jobs than we would like, which creates more social needs that have to be addressed in the community. And it makes it hard to just say we're going to have a static budget. We are not self-sustaining necessarily where we are now, and we continue to have population growth. So some growth is perfectly fine. How you do the growth is really important. I'm not a believer in sprawl and pushing things farther out and loading up the density away from where it belongs. I think we need a more balanced growth plan in the county. It doesn't make sense. I mean, we're in downtown Bethesda. Virtually everything being built here is a one-bedroom apartment, overwhelmingly. So if you think about it, we talk about livable, walkable communities. It's a livable, walkable community for single people. The apartments being built will not sustain families staying here. And so if we want to have a more compact environment, we've got to make sure that we build complete communities. And even in a place like Bethesda, there's a mix of 1 bedrooms as well as 3 bedrooms, and even an occasional 4 bedroom. It's got to be affordable. It can't be $3,000 and $4,000 for apartment, $2,500 for a studio, because there's a whole bunch of folks in this county who will never afford that. And so we have to be willing to come up with housing plans that actually provide balance. So, I think, the growth numbers are slowing down, obviously, and it's not just from Montgomery County regionally. People are seeing, more people going to other jurisdictions. I'd say that, the computers and the ability to work remotely have opened up opportunities for people. Their businesses have been able to go to, lower cost locations, knowing that they could attract the workforce there. So we're not, we don't seem to have a runaway growth problem. We just need to manage it and make sure we build the right things in the right places. And that every solution is not a road. I'm a big believer in transit. I think that people think you could widen Connecticut Avenue or widen Wisconsin Avenue. That is not the solution to our problems. We have to move people into transit. We've got to get people out of the cars to the greatest extent that we possibly can. Road building doesn't get us there.
More questions from the participants? One in the back. You can take that. We have more here.
So not a whip deck comment, but just one general thing that sort of stuck with me for a while. It may be wise to consider having and if this already exists, I apologize, it's a stupid question, but having a federal facilities coordinator that works directly for you, or however that would work within the local government here, to work with the different federal facilities, NIH, we've got more in Montgomery County than most states have. And we work with a lot of states that have 1, maybe 2 people that are a point person. And it can range from working on, hey, the gate's backing up traffic, to to more significant things where that person's identifying economic development opportunities to say, hey, USIS is doing 3D blood printing, and you did this person's doing that. Maybe we could have something that comes out of that. So they perform a multitude of functions. We used to kind of have that with Phil Alperson as the BRAC coordinator, but that was federally funded for the BRAC implementation. This would be something that the county does to support all federal facilities. And frankly, you got this ARPA-H, which I think will have appropriations. NIH will tell you, oh, we're going to build it on NIH's campus. No way, there's no space there to build something based on what I've heard. So is that something that you could facilitate outside the gate for that coordination? So that's what a federal facility coordinator could do. And again, I think Montgomery County is unique. We just have so many different facilities here. FDA, they need and they prefer having that one point of contact that they can go to for all their range of issues. But for you, I think it also serves that other part of looking at opportunities and things that you can build off of.
So we have somebody who actually works with federal government, works to identify, federal opportunities, real estate, needs there. I don't think we do it quite at the level, and Pete, you would, we don't really do it at the level he's describing.
No,
Though you and your predecessor may well have been drafted into dealing with issues that are raised by. So I think, that's something we could look at. I mean, we've tried to reach out more to the federal establishments here. I've met with folks at NIH. We're talking about, what do we need to do and what do we want to do? How does what you do fit into our economic development plans? Believe me, when we're talking about White Flint, NIH is not obtuse to the fact that we're looking at doing this just above their campus. It is something that would be mutually beneficial.
I have a question here from Leslie McDonald, nonprofit Montgomery. Nonprofits have been essential partners with the county in the pandemic response. How will you keep needed funds flowing to nonprofits?
I expect that the budget will continue to address the needs of the nonprofits. We've put money into the nonprofits. We will keep, helping the nonprofits meet the needs. They frankly are extensions of the county government in the practical world. A lot of people see the programs they do, they associate it with the government anyway. So we'll continue to make sure they're able to address their needs, because it's not, at the end of the day, it's the people they serve that's of most important to us. If we don't serve those folks, then we're all going to pay the consequences of that. So I anticipate being able to continue funding them. And we are looking at different ways of funding them that deal with some of the problems they have now. They work on a reimbursement model now. We're looking at moving a little bit away from a strict reimbursement model. For those of you who don't understand that, if you're a nonprofit, you're expected to do work for 3 months, submit a bill, and they get reimbursed for what you did for the previous 3 months. That's a lift for a lot of organizations, because that means you have to have 3 months of operating capital lying around that you can pull on to operate until you get reimbursed. So we're looking and examining, can we make this a little simpler for nonprofits so they're not hit the same way as they are now.
I don't think I'm, Karen Metches. So I guess there's time for another question. Can you talk a little bit about working with the county council on agreeing on priorities for implementing the climate plan, and what the process is or what the prospects are? I mean, I know there's going to be some tough decisions, that not everyone will support everything, but knowing where this is a critical issue, both, again, both on the adaptation and the mitigation side. So you just discuss that a little bit.
I guess I'm hopeful, and I'm hoping that the passage of the Green Building Code is indicative that this is one thing that people pretty much will widely agree upon. I think it's going to be hard to not want to do things in this climate. I think there's an expectation by everybody that, we have to address climate change seriously. We already had in our budget built in, the bus transformation, the microgrid, and all that stuff goes through the council. I mean, at the end of the day, the county doesn't do anything that isn't ultimately approved by the county council. They're the ultimate spending authority in the county. So we'll continue to develop ideas. They've got the plan. They can, I know, for example, Nancy Navarro introduced an amendment that would deal with how do you help funds in priority areas where incomes are low, and addressing improvements to buildings could raise rents to the point that we'd actually displace residents. We had a huge chapter in the climate plan that focuses on this problem, because it's clear that without resources, we run the risk of displacing people in large numbers. So I was happy to see that amendment. I think it's going to be helpful, and we'll continue to work with them to identify things that we can strengthen. I mean, the plan, I don't ever assume that because you send something over, this is the end of the story. And particularly on the climate plan, if people can find ways of amplifying it or identify resources that we haven't identified yet, more power to them. We have to work our way together out of this mess, and that's what I hope we can do.
All right, we have about 7 minutes before we conclude this presentation. We have several other questions here on the chat. I'm going to throw a couple of questions to you, Mr. County Executive, and then give you a couple of minutes for closing remarks. Here we go. How do you plan to bring jobs and growing businesses to Montgomery County?
Well, like I said, a number of things. One is building a transit system so that I can actually tell people that we're going to deal with the traffic in Montgomery County. Virginia eats our lunch, and I'll go back to what I said about tax structure. I have a tax structure that I cannot bond on. The only money I get from developers are these things called impact taxes. They're lumpy. If each one of you sitting in this room were building or a potential building in Bethesda, I only get money from you when you build. That is not enough money to fund the project. So in the Montgomery County, it goes in this thing called the Impact Tax Fund. And then when there's enough money in the fund, some project somewhere in the county gets built. That's it. And the money goes away. Virginia uses development districts. With the development districts, they're able to float 20, 30-year bonds. The development districts, the taxes are paid a fairly low tax rate, more or less, on commercial property. That helps them fund it. The commercial property, I got to say that, Virginia asked for this structure, went to the Virginia General Assembly when the governor and the legislature were Republican. And with the support of the business community and developer community particularly, they got Virginia to give the Northern Virginia's counties these taxing authorities that I don't have. With those taxing authorities, they built the Silver Line. Every single Northern Virginia jurisdiction is looking at bus rapid transit projects. They can do things that we can't do. And if we do not adopt the system that provides the kind of cash flow that they do, and is actually better for developers on the system we have today, if you pay me an income tax, that's built into the financing of your project, unless you happen to have tens of millions of dollars lying around, which a lot of people don't have. So now you've got to finance it. It's carried as debt, and your tenants are going to pay it in the rent. If it's done as a development district, you are not financing that tranche when you build your project. It is true you will pay it, but you will pay it over a long period of time. I can go out and say, I'm going to build bus rapid transit up Rockville Pike. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. We're going to do a 30-year bond spread over all the commercial property here. This is what it's going to cost. I could do what Virginia does if I have the tools that Virginia has. People have to unwrap themselves from the Montgomery County way. I got to say, I get tired of hearing about our way, because our way isn't always successful. Our way has not enabled us to build infrastructure. We still struggle to build schools. Anybody who's a parent out here knows we've not been able to fully meet our school requirements. There are ways we can do there, but it's going to mean we're going to have to rethink our approaches. And we're going to have to be willing to look at what other people do and learn from it. Virginia doesn't give things away to developers. I'll tell you a shocking fact. We have a study that was not done by me. It was done by a company which we'll be bringing this out very shortly, that compares Montgomery County business taxes, development taxes, against everybody in the region. You know the cheapest places in the region? Montgomery County. We are the lowest taxed place in the region. If you're developing in Tyson's Corner, you're paying $1.65 on your property taxes. Montgomery County, no. If you're any commercial property in Fairfax County, you pay 12.5 cents property tax on top of the $1.15 property tax. Any commercial property. If you have any business in Fairfax County, you pay what they call the BPOL tax, 3%, up to 3% of your gross revenues. That money goes to transportation. 0.7 of 1 cent of their 6 cents sales tax goes to transportation projects in Fairfax County. You add all that stuff up and then look at my budget and my resources, they don't compare. They made a conscious decision to go with a different form of taxes so they could build the infrastructure that they needed to attract development. If I can build the infrastructure, I can attract development. If we could go out with a straight face to somebody and say, that transit line that we promised you that's in the master plan will be built by 2025, and I could do it, then I would be able to attract somebody here. But when people tell us that if a developer asks them, could the county deliver this in this time frame, their answer is, we don't know. The business community doesn't like we don't know. You know, money is easier to deal with than uncertainty. And people aren't going to build where things are uncertain. So I'm not in favor of giving away the store. I do believe development needs to pay for infrastructure, but there's a way to do it that's less painful for them and a lot less painful for us. If we could tell residents with a straight face that we're going to provide the transportation and not turn this place into a parking lot, we wouldn't get the resistance we get from communities over development. But looking at Montgomery County's long history of not delivering transportation projects, why would anybody believe that we're actually going to put in place the things we tell people we're going to put in place? So if there's a way forward, we can get there. And that's what I plan on doing.
Okay, I am going to go ahead and read a couple of comments here from virtual participants, and then I am going to pose the last question so that you have some time, Mr. County Executive, for your closing remarks. I'm concerned, this is anonymous, about the low morale of our fine county police force. More are leaving the force than being recruited and hired. Lori Pross, aging, happening to all of us, needs attention from a budget point of view. Aging affects housing, healthcare, and community-based services. And the last question, which is anonymous, will the Office of Equity focus on ageism in county government?
I can't say it'll focus on ageism alone, but it's an issue we have to address. We know that I can't say I've seen it directly in county government because we have a workforce that spans all age groups. This is not strictly a young workforce in Montgomery County, but we're well aware that in general in the county that, I talk to lots of older people who say they can't get a job. They've got experience, they're too young to retire, they want to move on and do something else, and they don't get it. Part of it, they say, is that, employers view older people as expecting higher wages and that younger people will work for less. There's a culture of feeling that just people are just old, and for some reason, some people don't want to hire them. But I think we have to address it. We've worked with the Jewish Council for the Aging. We do these job fairs and education efforts to try to help place people in jobs, to find employers who are looking for seniors who want to work, and we'll continue to do that actively.
Okay, thank you, Mr. County Executive. Thank you for this live in the house audience, and now to you for some closing remarks.
So look, I want to thank everybody who came here and everybody who tuned in from home. I think this is really important. I've tried, from as long as I've been on the council to now, to always be square with people. Not necessarily tell you what you want to hear, but at least let you know, what are the real things we're dealing with. It'd be great to just give everybody quick, facile answers. Yes to this, yes to that. Everything is great. Everything people ask for is good. Everything people ask for is legitimate. The county still exists in the real world that's bounded by revenue. And so at the end of the day, when we put together a budget and we take care of all the things we have to spend, we do our best to apportion what's left to address the needs that are seated in the community. And we're going to continue to do that. I am committed to working on this economic development plan because I think, the only way out of this mess, or at least to lighten the load of what we've inherited here, is to build an economy that produces more jobs and more revenue for the county. We would all benefit from that. My job, and I think, frankly, everybody's job in government, is to make sure that when we go forward with that we respect the people who live here. There's a lot of talk about who's coming. I got 1.1 million people living here today. So you can't build the future without considering the people who are already here. You can't plan only for people who are coming and not plan for the people who are here. So we need something that is comfortable enough for people to see themselves in the future. We need processes that take into account the opinions of people who live here so that they feel like they're part of what this future is going to be. When people don't feel they're part of the planning, they don't have any confidence in the planning. When all they hear about is somebody else, they don't see themselves in the picture. We need to do a better job of making everybody feel welcome here. Montgomery County's developed this reputation as a welcoming community. It is great to go out there and talk about the diversity in Montgomery. We've done a lot of work over the years, and I always give Ike Leggett a lot of credit for that. He was, the person who, coined the expression about if the table is not larger and everybody doesn't fit, build a bigger table. And we're going to continue to build bigger tables and involve people. And I will continue to talk to you. I'll answer questions frankly, and you should feel free to ask questions. There's no wrong question. There's no bad question. We may not always agree about things, but you're entitled to ask. I will give you answers. We agree, we don't agree. The important thing is we talk to each other and that we recognize that everybody is committed to trying to build a stronger future for this county. I'm committed to doing that, and that is my promise to you. And you should be able to look at my work and see the things that we've done. Look at what we did in the middle of COVID. You know, we managed things in a way that I can't even think of other places that got as far, frankly, as we did. So this is not an accident. There's a deliberateness about what we did to make sure that everybody in this county was protected and safe, and we're going to keep doing that. So again, thank you all, and stay tuned.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Thank you, everybody. Safe drive home. Tomorrow we have another one.
6,177 millones de personas en Maryland. De ese total, estamos hablando de 729,000, casi 730,000 latinos que viven en el estado de Maryland. Y de estos, 492, casi 500,000 personas son latinos mayores de 18 años. Ahora, en el condado de Montgomery, la población total es una jurisdicción del estado. Estamos hablando de 1,50 millones de personas. De esos, te voy a dar esta cifra porque es la cifra que obtuve incluso del condado, no del condado,